Okay, so the next step in our process here, in the first step here, we combined the demo patient's data and the demo pharmacy's data and calculated the distance between the patients and the pharmacies, and created a table called PATS and PharmS temp. Now, what we want to do in this next step here is um, we need to bring in, append the patient data to this PATS and PharmS data, and in order to create our terminal nodes, as well as add the patients into the source nodes. We'll do that by first standardizing the rows in each of these tables so that they both have the same columns, standardizing the columns in both of these tables so that they both have the same columns with the same names in the same order. And then we'll union the data. And basically what that means is we're going to add the demo patient rows to the patient and pharmacy data. And then we'll output that to another temp table called Geo Network Data Temp. Now the target that we're looking for, the shape of the table that we're trying to produce here is going to look like this. We're going to have these columns here, a node source column, right, which is going to contain all of the patient IDs and all of the MPIs or the pharmacy IDs. And then we're going to have a node target column that's going to contain all the patient IDs, except 4 rows where it's null, and that is going to signify a terminal node. And then we'll have the latitude and longitude for the source node. So if the source node value is a patient ID, this latitude and longitude will represent the patient's home. If this source node ID is a pharmacy ID, then the node lat and long will be the coordinates for that pharmacy's address. And then we bring in, the distance and several other attributes related to the patient and related to the pharmacy, which we can use for filtering and adding other contextual information to our data visualization. So, like in the previous step, we brought in a table node, we brought in for the patients and pharmacy temp table, and we brought in the demo patients table again, and we connected those to queries. But in these queries, we are going to actually rename the fields, right? So for this first one, we've got our PATS and pharmacy temp table. And the first column, we're going to set the NPI as the node source. And the second column will be the patient ID as the node target. And then we're setting since the source node here is the MPI, we're going to make the node lat and long the pharmacy lat and long values. And then everything else pretty much stays the same. Now let's look at the other query, the demo patients query. Now this one's going to look a little bit different. So this is just the patient data, and we're appending this to the other table so that the source node can also contain patient ID, right? Because that source node column has to contain all of the nodes, which are all the patients and all of the pharmacies. Now, for this table, we are setting the node target to nulls using a calculated field. And that's because these will represent those terminal nodes. And then because this source node is a patient, we want to make sure that we're using the patient lat and long for the node lat and long. And then there are other calculated fields in here that represent some attributes that aren't related directly to just the patient. For example, the pharmacy name, right? A patient row won't have a pharmacy name, yet it's one of the columns that we are capturing in our final output table. So we'll include it here, but we will calculate it as a null value. And same for things like open on weekends, open after 5 p.m. These are all attributes that are describing the pharmacy, so we don't want to bring that in here. And you can create calculated items over here by just clicking on this, and this brings up an expression editor, and you can build out very simple or very complex calculations that you can build on the fly here. All right, so these two queries now have basically standardized the columns between these two tables, and now we can union them together. And we do that with this union object, and you can see that it's pulling in query 2, and it's using the union all function, which basically appends all of the rows from query 3 to all the rows of query 2, and it ignores any duplicates. And you can add where clauses if you like, but we're not going to do any of that. And then lastly here, the output of this union, we are going to create a new temporary table in our work library to collect this data, this union data, and we're going to call it geo network data temp. All right, so from here I'm going to run my flows, and it's going to start sequentially at the top with this first swim lane and run through these steps. Once it completes these steps, it'll then jump into the next swim lane. Looks like we've got an error. Damn it. Okay, so now I'm ready to rerun the flow and produce my geo network data temp file. So click run, and what this is going to do, it's going to run each of these work streams or swim lanes in sequence, right? So I'll do the first, and then I'll do the second one here, and we can see that it's completed successfully. I've got green check marks on all of these, and you can see I've got a few temporary tables that have built out, as well as my new table, geo network data temp. And I can expand the columns here, and I can see that I've got my node source, my node target, lat, long, all the columns that I had defined in this work stream swim lane, and then I'll open up the table and just take a look at it. And so I can see that I've got in my node source, looks like I have several MPIs here. In my node target, I've got my patient IDs. And if I want, I could do a sort ascending. And I can see that I also have in my node source, I've got my patient IDs, which are with a null node target, signifying a terminal node. So everything is looking pretty good. And we can see, where I've entered those null calculated values for distance miles. And if I come here, right, so I've got a null pharmacy name, which makes sense for my patient terminal nodes here. So yeah, so that looks good. So I think the last thing I need to do is add to my flow a step that will take this data out of my work environment, which is an area that I only have access to, and publish it to an area where I can create reports and others can kind of share and access the data as well.